87. The agent kept the old woman's ticket under his fingers. Her coat looked worn, but her seat was first class. One man saw what everyone else ignored. Why did that ticket make them doubt her dignity? First thing Ethan noticed was not the old woman's coat or the scuffed handle of the cloth bag hanging from her wrist. It was the way the airline agent held her ticket, 2 fingers, slightly away from his body, bound, as if the paper itself had become something unpleasant. The first-class waiting area at the Pittsburgh airport was bright enough to make everything look colder. Winter light pressed against the tall windows. Pale and sharp, travelers sat in low leather chairs, with their phones in their hands and their carry-ons parked neatly beside them. The room had the polished quiet of a place where people paid extra not to be bothered. The porter stood near the front of the boarding line, small in an old gray coat, her white hair tucked carefully behind one ear. She did not look angry. That was what bothered Ethan most. They were on a sound. Angry people still believed they had some power left. Helen only looked tired, as if this kind of moment had happened before, and she had learned not to expect much from it. The agent behind the counter smiled at her with a kind of patience that did not feel patient at all. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying just enough for the line to hear. "This boarding group is for first-class passengers," and tightened around the strap of her bag. "Yes," she said. "That's why I'm here." The agent glanced down at the ticket again. His name tag read Mark Ellison. His uniform sat on him as if he had ironed it twice that morning. Nothing in his face was openly cruel. That made it worse. He looked like a man doing everything properly while quietly taking something away from someone. "There may be some confusion," Mark said. "This ticket appears to be for a premium seat." Helen blinked once. "It is my ticket." A man behind her shifted with a soft, annoyed breath. Someone else looked over the top of a tablet. He said anything. In rooms like that, silence could feel clean from a distance, but up close it had weight. Ethan stood several places back with his sister, Claire. He had one hand on the handle of his carry-on and the other tucked inside the pocket of his dark work jacket. The jacket still smelled faintly of electrical dustet and cold metal, no matter how many times he washed it. Near his feet sat a flat folder with their mother's old papers sealed inside, the last thin bundle of Ruth Ward's life that still needed to be carried somewhere and signed over by someone. He had not wanted Claire to come with him. Claire had not asked if he wanted her to. She stood beside him in a pale blazer that looked too clean for an airport morning, her hair pinned back, her phone face down in one hand, as if she were proving she could ignore it. He had handled the calls, the appointments, the legal wording, the things Ethan had no patience for. He had handled the long months, the night pills, the hospital parking garage. The way their mother's voice had become softer and softer near the end. Neither of them had said that out loud. "Ethan," Claire murmured, without looking at him. "Don't." He had not moved yet. "I'm not doing anything," he said. "You're about to." That was Claire. She could read a room quickly. She could read him even faster when she wanted to stop him. At the counter, Helen opened her small wallet with careful fingers. "I have my ID," she said. "Boarding pass is right there." "I checked in this morning." Mark did not scan the ticket. He did not return it either. "I understand," he said. "But we do have to make sure passengers are in the correct area. These seats are often purchased through special accounts, reward programs, corporate bookings. It can be confusing." Helen's face changed then. Not much, only enough that Ethan saw it. A small drawing inward around the mouth, person hearing a polite sentence and understanding the insult inside it. "I bought no corporate booking," she said. "I'm going to Boston." The word Boston tugged at Ethan. He looked down at the folder near his feet. Then Boston was where the last set of papers waited, where Claire said everything could finally be settled. Settled. That was the word she liked, as if grief were a drawer that could be closed once the documents were in order. Placed Helen's ticket flat on the counter, but kept 2 fingers on it. "Perhaps you could step aside for a moment while we review this," he said. Helen looked past him toward the jet bridge, then back at the ticket beneath his hand. "Is there something wrong with it?" We're just trying to protect the boarding process. Ethan heard that word the way he heard a bad wire hum behind a wall. Process, the kind of word people used when they wanted to sound fair while making sure somebody small moved out of the way. He took one step forward. Claire's hand closed around his sleeve. "Please," she whispered, "we have an appointment when we land. We cannot miss this flight because you want to argue with a gate agent." He looked at her hand on his jacket. Her nails were neat, pale, expensive, speaking. He remembered the same seeking forms at the hospital desk, quick and dry-eyed, while he stood beside their mother's bed, wondering why the room always smelled like warm plastic and old coffee. "She has a ticket," Ethan said quietly. "You don't know what's going on." "I know he hasn't scanned it." Claire's jaw tightened. She looked toward the other passengers, then toward Mark, then back to Ethan. Her worry was not only about the flight, he could see that now. She hated scenes. She hated anything that could not be managed with a calendar invite, a signature, or a payment made on time. At the counter, Helen reached for the ticket, lifted it before her fingers touched it. That was when Ethan moved, not fast, not dramatically. He simply stepped out of the line and walked to the front, the rubber soles of his work boots quiet against the polished floor. Few heads turned. Claire said his name under her breath, sharp enough to cut, but he did not stop. He came to stand beside Helen, not too close, just close enough that she was no longer alone. Mark looked him over. The work jacket, the tired eyes, the small burn mark near the base of Ethan's thumb, where a panel had sparked on him weeks earlier. "Sir," Mark said, "boarding will begin shortly. Please return to your place in line." Ethan looked at the ticket in Mark's hand. "Is there a problem with her boarding pass?" Mark's smile stayed in place. "As I just explained to the passenger, we're verifying. Then scan it." Dean behind them went still in that particular way people go still when they are embarrassed but also grateful not to be involved. Mark's eyes cooled. "Sir, I don't need instruction on how to perform my duties." "No," Ethan said, "but she doesn't need to be made to stand here, like she stole something." Helen turned toward him. Then, her eyes were pale blue and wet, not with tears exactly, but with the effort of holding herself steady. "You don't have to trouble yourself," she said softly. Ethan did not know her. He did not know where she had bought the ticket or why she was flying alone, or why her old bag seemed to matter more to her than the line of strangers staring at her back. He only knew the look on her face. He had seen it on his mother in waiting rooms when forms were missing, when insurance words became doors, when people spoke slowly to her because illness had made her seem less important. Behind him, Claire came closer. Her voice was low, controlled, and full of alarm. "Ethan, enough. Let them handle it." He turned just enough to see her. For a moment, they were children again in a house where money was always counted twice. Except now, Claire wore success like armor, and he wore the same kind of jacket people stopped noticing once the lights worked. "This is them handling it," he said. Claire's eyes flicked toward the passengers, toward Mark, with the folder tucked under Ethan's arm. "We are not here for this." That landed harder than she meant it to. Ethan saw it in her face the instant after she said it. They were here for their mother, They were here because Ruth Ward was gone and paperwork had outlived her. They were here because Claire wanted everything finished cleanly. Ethan had not yet figured out how to forgive her for being absent when nothing about dying had been clean. Mark straightened behind the counter. "Sir, if you continue to interfere, we'll have to ask you to step away from the gate area." Ethan did not raise his voice. "Scan the ticket." Helen's hand trembled at her side. The ticket was still under Mark's fingers. Claire reached for Ethan again, just touching his sleeve, but gripping it, her face tight with fear and embarrassment. "Ethan," she said, almost pleading now, "please don't make this worse." He looked from his sister's hand to Helen's ticket, still held by a man who had not yet done the one simple thing that would tell the truth. And in the cold brightness of Gate 7, Helen Porter stood before the counter with nothing but her old coat, her quiet dignity, first-class ticket, in someone else's hand. For a few seconds, No one at Gate 7 seemed to know where to look. The travelers who had been watching over their coffee cups and phone screens lowered their eyes, then lifted them again, unable to resist the quiet pull of trouble. Helen stood very still at the counter, her shoulders drawn in beneath her old coat, kept her ticket under his fingers, as if returning it would mean losing more than a piece of paper. Claire's grip on Ethan's sleeve tightened. "Ethan," she said under her breath. "This is not the way. Pull away from her." He only looked at Mark. "There's a scanner right there," he said. "Use it." Mark's smile thinned. "Sir, I have already explained that we are verifying the passenger's eligibility. If he has a boarding pass, we have procedures. Then follow the part where you check it." A woman near the rope gave a small cough into her scarf. A man in a dark overcoat shifted his bag from one hand to the other, irritated but unwilling to speak. That was the shape of the room now. Everyone watching, everyone pretending not to be part of it. Helen lifted her chin a little, as if Ethan's presence beside her had given her just enough room to breathe. "I can show my ID again," she said. Mark turned back to her with that same clean, careful voice. "Mom, the issue is not simply identification. Passenger is as in the incorrect boarding lane, especially in a premium area, we have to make sure there hasn't been a misunderstanding." The word misunderstanding made Ethan's jaw set. Helen had not misunderstood anything. She had stood where her ticket told her to stand. The misunderstanding belonged to the man behind the counter who had looked at her coat, her cloth bag, her careful old hands, and decided the ticket must be the mistake. Claire stepped beside Ethan now, close enough that her blazer brushed his jacket. She kept her voice low, but her eyes were sharp with panic. "We are going to miss the appointment," she said. "This turns into a formal complaint. It could take all morning." Then he scanned the ticket. He scanned the ticket. "You don't even know her." Ethan looked at Helen. The old woman's fingers were folded together in front of her bag, a shake. She looked less frightened of Mark than of becoming a burden to the stranger who had stepped in for her. "No," Ethan said. "I don't." That was all he said, but Claire understood what he meant. Did not have to know Helen to know what was happening. Mark took a slow breath, the kind a person takes when preparing to sound reasonable while refusing to be moved. "Sir, if the passenger will step to the side, I will review the matter as soon as I am able." "No," Ethan said. The single word fell heavier than a raised voice would have. Claire looked at him as if he had just stepped off the edge of something. Mark's eyes hardened. Faint murmur moved through the line. Ethan reached down with his free hand and picked up the folder he had set near his carry-on. He tucked it under his arm, not thinking about it, making sure nothing of his mother's was left on the floor. The old papers shifted inside with a dry sound. Helen's eyes followed the movement. It was only a glance at first. Then her gaze stayed there, fixed on the label Claire had placed across the front of the folder in her neat, professional handwriting. "Ward family documents." Something changed in Helen's face. Not surprise exactly. Recognition came more slowly than that, rising through her like a name heard from another room. Ethan did not notice at first. He was still watching Mark. "You don't need to move her out of line to verify a boarding pass," he said. "You know that." Posture stiffened. "And you know airport procedure?" "I know enough electrical panels in this place to know when people blame the system because they don't want to touch the switch." That brought a deeper silence. A clever line, and Ethan did not say it like one. It came out plain, almost tired, but plain words sometimes had more weight than polished ones. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. Mark's face colored, just slightly. "Finma, this is a secure boarding area. I am responsible for maintaining order." "Then start with fairness." Helen's hand moved toward the folder, then stopped before touching it. She looked up at Ethan. For the first time, her voice carried something other than strain. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Did you say your name was Ward?" Ethan turned to her. "No," he said, caught off guard. "I didn't." Went to the folder again. "But you are?" Claire went still beside him. Ethan hesitated. The question felt too personal for the middle of an airport line. But Helen had asked it with such quiet care that he could not brush it away. "Yes," he said. "Ethan Ward." Helen's lips parted slightly. For a moment she seemed to forget the ticket, the line, even Mark standing behind the counter. "Ruth Ward," she said, almost to herself. The name passed through Ethan like a hand laid unexpectedly on his chest. Claire's head turned sharply. "What did you say?" she asked. Helen looked between them now. Fear in her face had changed into something more tender and more difficult. "Ruth," she said. "Was she your mother?" Ethan felt the folder under his arm grow heavier. Mark, sensing the room slipping away from him, cleared his throat. "Mom, this is not the time for personal conversation. If you would please step aside." Ethan did not look at him. "Yes," he said to Helen. She was. Helen's eyes shone, but she did not cry. She held herself with the careful dignity of a woman who had learned, long ago, not to spend emotion where strangers could mishandle it. "I knew her," she said. Claire's mouth tightened. "From where?" Fingers closed around the strap of her cloth bag. "The hospital." Ethan stared at her. In his mind, the airport fell away for one brief second, replaced by white hallways, vending machine coffee, the sound of nurses' shoes, his mother's thin hand resting on a blanket. He had known many faces from those months. Nurses, ADs, reception workers, cleaning staff moving quietly after midnight, people who made the place work and disappeared before anyone thanked them properly. Helen swallowed. "I worked nights there," she said. "Not in the rooms, mostly the halls, the waiting areas." "But your mother," she stopped, as if deciding how much sorrow could be spoken in public. "Your mother was kind to everyone." Claire's hand dropped from Ethan's sleeve. The line behind them had changed again. The irritation had thinned. Even the man in the overcoat was no longer pretending to check his phone. Mark still held the ticket, but now it seemed smaller in his hand. Ethan looked at Helen's old bag, at the careful way she stood, at the pale blue of her eyes. He had thought he was defending a stranger from a petty humiliation. But the ground beneath the moment had shifted. This woman was not standing outside his life at all. Somehow, impossibly, he had been. Inside one of the hardest rooms of it, Claire spoke, but her voice had lost its polished edge. "How did you know our mother?" Helen looked down at the folder once more, at the name Ward written across it. He looked back at Ethan and Claire, and the old woman who had been trying so hard not to take up space suddenly seemed to be carrying something neither of them was ready to hear. "I don't think," she said quietly, "Ruth ever had the chance to tell you." The name Ruth did not sound the same coming from Helen. When Ethan said it, the name carried grief. When Claire said it, it carried duty. But when Helen spoke it, standing there, in the hard light near Gate 7, it sounded like someone opening a door to a room the Ward children had never entered. Claire's face went still, saw the shift, and tried to step back into the center of the moment. "Mom," he said, "personal matters will have to wait. We need to resolve the boarding issue." Ethan turned his head slowly toward him. "The boarding issue is simple." "Scan her ticket." Mark's jaw tightened. "Sir, this has become disruptive." "No," Ethan said. "You made it disruptive when you held her ticket and made her explain herself in front of everyone." Few passengers looked away. One woman near the rope lowered her phone into her purse. The ordinary airport sounds kept going around them. Announcements, wheels rolling over tile, distant voices from other gates. Near the counter, everything had gone strangely quiet. Helen touched the strap of her cloth bag with both hands. "I don't want trouble," she said. Ethan softened at once. "You didn't cause any." Helen looked at him. "Claire, your mother used to say that too. When people made things hard for her, she would apologize first, as if being sick had made her an inconvenience." Claire swallowed. The word sick seemed to reach her before the rest of the sentence did. "You knew her at the hospital," Claire said. Helen nodded. "I worked nights, mostly cleaning. Halls, waiting rooms, sometimes the family rooms after visiting hours." She gave a small, careful smile that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. "People think the night staff doesn't see much. But at night, people stop pretending." Ethan felt the folder under his arm. Ruth's papers were inside, labeled, clipped, and reduced to the clean order Claire preferred. He had thought those papers were the last things his mother had left unfinished. Helen stood before him like another page entirely. "What did you do for her?" he asked. Helen looked down as if the answer embarrassed her. "Not much," she said. "Small things." Claire's eyes sharpened. "What small things?" There was no accusation in her voice, not quite. But there was fear. Ethan knew that tone. Claire used it when some threatened to slip beyond her control. Helen opened her cloth bag with slow fingers, made a slight movement, as though he might object, then stopped when Ethan looked at him. From the bag, Helen took out a small stack of old cards, bound with a worn elastic band. She did not hand them over at first. He held them close, like something that had survived many drawers, many moves, many lonely evenings. "These are thank you notes," she said, "from patients, families, people I met over the years." Ethan saw the top card. The handwriting was faded but gentle. Claire saw it too. Her breath caught before Ethan's did. "That's Mom's writing," she said. Helen nodded. "She wrote to me after I helped her with the room." "What room?" Claire asked. The step-down room she was moved out of when there was an insurance delay. Helen spoke carefully, not like a woman trying to accuse anyone, but like a woman trying not to wound them more than the truth required. He was frightened. She didn't want to tell you both how frightened she was. Ethan's throat tightened. He remembered that week, or the pieces of it. Ruth had told him not to make a fuss. She had said the nurses were working on it. He had slept in a vinyl chair and eaten crackers from a vending machine because leaving the building felt like betrayal. Claire had called twice from another city and promised she was handling the billing office. "I sent money," Claire said suddenly. No one answered. The words hung there, too small for what she meant and too large for what they could repair. Helen looked at her with painful kindness. "I know, dear. Your mother knew that too." Claire blinked quickly, as if kindness had struck harder than blame. Helen continued. "There were fees that had to be covered before the room could be held. Not all of it, just enough to keep things from moving too fast. He had some savings from extra shifts. A few others helped when they could. Your mother made me promise not to tell you while she was alive." Ethan stared at the card in Helen's hands. His mother had been protected by people he had walked past in hallways without knowing their names. People with carts and gloves and tired babaks. People who entered rooms after visitors left and saw what families missed. Claire's lips parted, but no words came. For years, she had carried her version of sacrifice like a receipt. The checks, the calls, the forms, the professional calm. An old woman in a gray coat had placed another kind of receipt in front of her, one that could not be filed away. Mark cleared his throat again, more sharply this time. "I'm sorry for your family situation," he said. "We still have a flight to board. If the passenger will step aside, I'll make a note and review." Claire turned to him. It was not dramatic. She did not raise her voice. But something in her face had changed. The woman who had been trying to make Ethan stop was gone for the moment, replaced by someone who finally understood the shape of the room. "No," she said. Mark blinked. "Excuse me, you will not make a note and bury it," Claire said. "You will scan her ticket. Then you will document why she was held at this counter after presenting it." Mark's expression cooled. "And you are?" Claire reached into her purse and removed a slim card case. Her hand was steady, but Ethan saw the color high in her cheeks. "Someone asking for a written record," she said. "And someone who knows the difference between procedure and selective enforcement." The words were clean, controlled. Claire's words always were. But this time they did not feel like a wall. They felt like a door opening. A supervisor had begun moving toward them from the service desk, drawn by the stillness around the gate, saw him coming and lowered his voice. "There has been a misunderstanding," he said. The passenger's eligibility was unclear. Ethan looked at the ticket still near Mark's hand. "You never checked it." The supervisor arrived, with the tired alertness of a man who had already sensed a problem waiting for him. "What's going on here?" Mark started first. This passenger was in the priority lane with documentation that required additional review, and this gentleman began interfering with. Claire cut in, calm and precise. The passenger had a first-class ticket. Your agent held it, refused to scan it, and repeatedly tried to move her out of line. I want the ticket scanned now, and I want a formal complaint opened. Helen drew back slightly. Please, she said, almost whispering. I don't need anyone punished. Ethan turned to her. This isn't punishment. Claire looked at Helen then, and the shame in her face was no longer hidden. It's a record, she said softly. For you, for whoever stood here before you, and had no one to ask for one. The supervisor hesitated, then reached for the ticket. Mark's fingers stayed on it for a half-second, too long before he let go. The scanner beeped, a small sound, almost ordinary. The supervisor looked at the screen. His mouth tightened. The ticket is valid, he said. No one in the line spoke. Helen closed her eyes briefly, not in triumph, in relief, so weary, it seemed to pass through her whole body. Ethan wanted to say something, but there was nothing large enough, and nothing simple enough. Claire looked at the card in Helen's hand again. May I see it? Helen hesitated, then gave it to her. Claire held the thank you note, as if it might break. Ethan watched her read, the slanted handwriting their mother had used when her hands were tired. He did not need to see the words. He knew the loops of the letters, the way Ruth always made the W too wide. Claire's face folded inward. For the first time that morning, she did not look like an attorney, or an older sister, in sound, or the person who had handled everything from a distance. She looked like a daughter who had arrived too late to a room she had paid for, but never entered. The supervisor had stepped to the service desk now, speaking quietly into a phone, then typing into a terminal. Mark stood beside him, stiff and pale with contained anger. Claire lifted her head. I want prior complaints checked, she said. Mark's eyes snapped to her. Necessary. It is now. The supervisor looked uncomfortable. Mom, that may take some time. Then take it. Ethan looked at his sister, and for a moment the anger he had carried toward her loosened. Not gone, forgiven all at once, but changed by the sight of her choosing the harder thing in public. The supervisor typed again. The first lines appeared on his screen. He read, stopped, and read again. Face told the room before his words did. Claire saw it. Ethan saw it. Mark saw it too. And as the old complaints began to open on the screen, Claire stepped closer to Helen, not behind Ethan now, not pulling him back, danger sound, but standing beside the woman she had nearly walked past. By the time the cabin door closed, the airport no longer felt like the same place. The noise from Gate 7 had been left behind, but not the weight of it. Ethan sat with his hands folded loosely in his lap, the faint burn mark near his thumb catching against the edge of his sleeve. Across the aisle, Claire looked down at nothing, her purse resting unopened at her feet. He had won the record she had demanded. The supervisor had taken the complaint. Mark had been pulled away from the counter, stiff-faced and silent, while another agent finished boarding Helen with an apology that arrived too late to undo the wound. Still, Helen had thanked them. That was what stayed with Ethan most. She had thanked them as if being believed were a favor, something she should have been given from the start. When they found their seats, Ethan stopped beside the window. It was his assigned place. He had chosen it without thinking. When Claire booked the flight, maybe she had chosen it for him. Either way, he looked at Helen, standing in the aisle, with her old cloth bag held close to her chest, and he knew he could not sit there. Mom, he said softly, would you like the window? Helen blinked, startled. Oh no, that's yours. I've seen plenty of runways, he said. I work around them. It was not a grand gesture. He did not say it loudly, but something in Helen's face eased, as if the seat were not about comfort at all. It was about being invited without having to prove she belonged. She ci dizindo. Ethan took the aisle seat beside her. Claire sat across from them, close enough to hear, and far enough away to feel the distance she had helped create. For a while, no one spoke. Outside, winter light lay flat over the runway. The plane began to move, slow and steady. Helen looked through the oval glass, with both hands resting on her bag. When the engines deepened, she closed her eyes for a moment. Ruth used to talk about traveling, Helen said. Ethan turned toward her. Claire did too. He never complained. Helen continued. Not directly. But sometimes, late at night, when the halls were quiet, she would talk as if talking to herself. She said she wanted to see Boston again when she was well enough, he said. You two had papers to settle there one day. And she hoped you would go together. Not separately. Claire's eyes dropped. Ethan felt the old anger move in him, but it no longer had the same shape. It had been easy to be angry when Claire was only the sister who had not been there. It was harder now with Helen between them, holding memories neither of them had earned. She didn't want us to worry, Ethan said. He smiled faintly. No, she wanted you to eat, to sleep, to not spend your whole life sitting beside a hospital bed. Claire's voice came thin. I sent money, I know, Helen said. She knew, Ismar. The kindness of that answer was almost unbearable. Claire pressed her fingers together in her lap, the way she had done at the gate when she was trying not to shake. Helen opened her cloth bag and took out the small bundle of cards. Again, she did not hand them over this time. She only rested them on her knee. She kept thanking me for things that were too small to thank anyone for, Helen said. A blanket from the warmer, a cup of tea, sitting with her until the nurse came back. Once, I paid part of a room hold because the paperwork was moving too slowly. And she cried like I had bought her the whole hospital. Ethan looked toward the window, though he was not the one sitting beside it. He saw only the pale wing and the gray sky beyond. How come she never told us? He asked. She thought you were both carrying enough. Claire wiped beneath one eye quickly, almost angrily, as if the tear had betrayed her. Helen looked at her then, not with blame. That made it worse. She was proud of you, Helen said. Both of you. He said. Ethan stayed when staying was hard. She said Claire built a life that would never have to ask permission from anyone. Claire made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Thought paying for things meant I was helping, she said. It was helping, Ethan said. She looked at him, surprised. He did not know when he had decided to give her that. Maybe when she had stepped beside Helen at the gate, feeding. Maybe when she had held their mother's card like it was something holy. Maybe, only now, hearing Ruth had seen both of them with more mercy than they had given each other. It just wasn't everything, he added. Claire nodded. He accepted the sentence, as if it were a verdict and a forgiveness. At the same time, though Ethan knew it was not fully either. When the plane lifted, Helen kept her eyes on the window. The old woman who had been made small at the counter now sat in the seat she had been told she did not look fit to occupy. Her hands still trembled a little, but her back was straighter. Flight attendant stopped beside them after the seatbelt sign went off. Her voice was gentle. She said the airline had confirmed a formal report would be filed. Mark had been removed from the gate pending review of prior complaints. She did not say it like a victory. She said it like an overdue correction. Helen only nodded. I hope, she said, that the next person won't need a stranger to stand beside her. Ethan looked across at the aisle at Claire. Claire looked back. A few weeks later, in a small office with second-hand chairs and a borrowed printer, Ethan watched his sister tape a paper sign to the inside of a glass door. She smoothed it twice, though it was already straight. That was Claire's way. If she could not fix the past, she would at least make the present orderly enough to hold something better. The sign was simple: Ruth and Helen Travel Fund. In smaller letters, Claire had written what the fund was for. Short-distance flights for older adults who needed to travel for medical care or family visits and had no one else to ask. It was not large. It did not have a boardroom or a press event. Claire had put in the first money. Ethan had found 2 retired airport workers willing to help with forms. Helen had insisted on bringing a tin of cookies to the first meeting and had argued gently but firmly that her name did not need to be on anything. Claire had disagreed. For once, she said, let someone who helped be seen. Helen had no answer to that. Ethan stood near the doorway, looking at the 2 names. His mother's name no longer sat only on medical forms, estate papers, folder, but then a sound, and the folder he had carried through Gate 7. It was on something still moving, something that would place an old person in a seat, hand them a boarding pass, and tell them without embarrassment that they belonged there. Claire came to stand beside him. "I don't know how to make up for all of it," she said. Ethan kept his eyes on the sign. "Maybe we don't." She nodded slowly. "Maybe we just stop leaving people alone." He turned then, for the first time in a long while. Looking at his sister did not feel like looking at an absence. It felt like looking at someone who had finally stepped into the room. Helen arrived a few minutes later, carrying her cloth bag as always. Ethan opened the door for her. Claire reached for the bag, but Helen laughed softly and held on to it. Inside were the old thank you cards. Ruth's was still on top. Helen placed the bundle on the small desk, beneath the new sign. Not as evidence, not as a wound, but as a beginning. The winter light came through the glass and fell across both names, Ruth and Helen, side by side, Billy, where no one had to guess which one belonged.